Give you every advantage I found. Couldn't find a better fit for them, along with my crown. And since the baton was passed, I've been down. Cause failing's not an option, and dad is not a noun, not at all.
My message to any dad, man, first off, know that, yeah, it is a hard job, but it's the greatest job in the world. I wouldn't trade it for anything. I wouldn't change anything about it. Everything you're doing from here on out, if it didn't have purpose before, now it has purpose. It's the most important thing you'll ever do. Just be a dad.
Welcome to another episode of Dad Is Not a Noun. My name is Ishmael, changing the narrative for men of color and fatherhood, as well as the things I care about. And today, I have a great guest with me today, returning champion. He's been on the show a couple of times, and I call him Uncle because, you know, he's Uncle. I'm truly honored to have him on. This Dr. Mustafa Santiago Ali. Thank you for coming on.
Oh, brother, thank you for allowing me to hold space with you. It's always a pleasure and an honor.
No, and it's real. I don't call a lot of people uncle, so I call them uncle. Before we get into the conversation, you know, I'm going to ask you this question because I asked everybody who's been on this show millions of times. How's your heart at this moment?
I'm focused on my blessings. You know, my mother's got some challenges that are going on, so I'm speaking to the ancestors and to the Creator, just asking for guidance and strength and healing. So I'm focused on the blessings that I know that are going to come. Definitely.
And then also, I want to get into the conversation because you just dropped a magnificent opinion piece in the Word in Black. If you haven't got Word in Black, you need to sign up for it because when it talks about political and stories that impact Black people, you need to get on there. So that link is going to be in the description below. When you talk about the sacrifice, because right now we're in day 3 of the government shutdown, and I think one of the most important part of the article that you said is that the shutdown is not a glitch, it's a strategy. Mm-hmm. So kind of take me into that mindset when you wrote that, when you said that shutdown is not a glitch, it's a strategy.
Yeah, because it's intentionality and how they are approaching the shutdown. So there have been shutdowns before, right? But we also understand who has been sacrificed in America, you know, throughout the history of this country. And of course, Black folks and Indigenous folks have always been the ones who have had to carry the burden, who have had to carry the weight, but also the ones who often, you know, were the ones that were not only being sacrificed, but being under-resourced, being placed in the most dangerous situations, the most dangerous jobs. So when I say this is not a glitch, because sometimes when people begin to have these political conversations and they use political language, they will use words for everything but what this is. So I wanted to be very clear about that, you know, this is just not politics. There is a greater set of actions that are going on in this moment and have been going on. Even before the new administration came in, there were plans. You've talked about the plans on your show. Some of the other places that I've talked about it, whether it was Project 2025 or Agenda 47, you can literally go back to the Reagan administration and watch the weaponization of government, the weaponization of a number of the tools that government utilizes that have been very destructive for our communities and, of course, other vulnerable communities as well. So I didn't want to sugarcoat it. I wanted to just tell it like it is, put it out there so that we can think strategically about how we address what's happening in this moment and, of course, moving forward through the civic process.
And I think the key component of that is that the largest employment of Black people is the federal government. So how does that impact us as Black people?
Well, you know, it's been one of the vehicles that we've been able to use to move into the middle class. And of course, you know, there's still the wealth disparities that exist inside of our communities. But when we have vehicles that help us to be able to move forward, then we need to make sure that we're paying attention to them, that we're honoring them, that we're holding them accountable. And there's ripple effects, right? So when, you know, Black folks who are working in the government are targeted and we begin to lose, it's not individuals who are losing, it's the community who loses, because these resources that, you know, folks are making, you know, they reverberate throughout our community. But we should also broaden it out, because when we're talking about a government shutdown, yes, we are talking about federal employment and federal workers, but we are also talking about those folks who have contracting and subcontracting opportunities with the federal government. And we know that there are a lot of brothers and sisters who are entrepreneurs. And one of the ways that they have moved forward has been, through those contracting opportunities. Of course, you got the grants that are out there. But if we're going to put it into sort of everyday folks situations, when you lose your job, then you're trying to figure out, how am I going to pay the rent? How am I going to be able to pay this mortgage? And if I'm not able to do that, there are now executive orders that if you are unhoused, you could literally be arrested. So, we got to take all that into consideration. They'll say, well, yeah, no, that's not what we mean. But that's not good enough for our communities, because we understand that the reality is that you will always take it to the furthest limit in relationship to us. We are also talking about, people just trying to put food on the table. So, when folks lose their jobs, you have that impact that's going on. We've got, all these amazing, amazing folks who are out there who have food pantries, who are doing all these other types of things to actually feed folks. So there are impacts that are happening there, because now there are these additional stressors of more and more people who, need that assistance to be able to move forward. So we can go down the laundry list of all the various things that go on in our lives and how this impacts you. If you want to talk about education, if you've got kids in school and you're trying to figure out how you're going to pay for them to be able to continue to learn, you've got that dynamic that's going on. Now you're trying to make a decision about your transportation costs, because we know, the prices for energy are continue to go up. So you have the impacts that are happening there. So we've got this cumulative set of impacts that are going on that are tied to, one, the sets of actions that they did before we ever got to the government shutdown. And now with the government shutdown, everything just continues to build and build and build. And yes, we are a resilient people. But the question becomes, how much weight can you actually carry on your shoulders before eventually you end up breaking or something snaps?
Yeah, and definitely. And then also on top of it, you take Congress out of the place of it, because now, like we were talking before, was the unitary executive theory, right? Where you have the executive, the president, and his team making the decision who they want to fire. Like it was, what was it? The OMB, the director of OMB, Vaught, basically said on uh, basic news, where he just gave out the game of what they're going to do, is that they're going to fire, they're going to have a massive firing of people in the federal government.
Yeah.
So
Well, yeah.
go ahead, add to it.
No. You're right on. It's the weaponization of government, right? So not only did we see, these hundreds of thousands of federal workers that were been let go over the last 7 months, but now they're taking the weaponization to a whole nother level, right? So they are actually focusing on areas where there are individuals who they feel didn't vote for them, or living in, people get into this red state, blue state thing. So sometimes that's easier for folks to understand. So even today, they're now, with third day into the shutdown, now they're focusing on, certain areas across the country where they're saying, we're going to freeze your resource. So you already got people who are being furloughed or fired. Now they're actually also freezing resources for things like infrastructure, things around food, things around being able to build certain things. And they're doing it in blue states, if you want to label it that way. And the exact same set of actions that are going on in what we could label as red states, if you want to do that, they're not creating the same sets of dynamics right there for folks who are there. So this weaponization is, I'd love to say it's un-American, but unfortunately we've seen the government, through the history of this country, that sometimes that's not the case. So I don't want to be disingenuous and make it sound like it's only in this moment. It has just been hyperized in this moment. It's on steroids, if you will, about how they're approaching this. So if you look at the Department of Energy, today they just freeze some significant resources that are critical for us being able to address, some of these issues that we see going on around climate, infrastructure, a number of other things. So there is a laundry list of the types of things they're doing. And again, it comes back to our communities. So the reason I raise that is because we know there's a lack of infrastructure inside of our communities. And the last administration had identified resources to be able to address, this longstanding need that existed. in relationship to healthcare, because they're making some cuts around healthcare as well. Of course, this is a part of this fight is around healthcare. So they're cutting resources there as well. So when it comes to our community, whether it is housing, whether it is transportation, whether it is jobs, whether it is healthcare, whether it's the environment, they are saying that you are able to be sacrificed because we don't see value in who you are, the communities that you come from.
And to for people who don't understand what we're talking about, this basically means like if you work for an employer and the employer decide we're not going to pay you, and this is they're not going to justify the reason why, but we're not going to pay you. You still have to come to work, but we're not going to pay you. But we're not going to justify why we're not going to pay you.
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what it is. And we have to put the additional layer on there. So not only am I not going to pay you, but you still have to carry all the costs that you normally would to be able to go to work, right? Mm-hmm. So, folks got to eat, but, you're not getting paid, but they still want you to show up. You still got to take the bus or the subway or drive your car or however you get there. But so you're supposed to carry all this cost. And here's the thing that is so infuriating, that they are using your tax dollars to be able to do these types of things. So you still got to pay your taxes, right? And we understand that dynamic. I'm not telling anybody not to pay your taxes. Pay your taxes, however much you actually owe. Yes. But also understand whether you are white or black or indigenous or Latino or whatever, whoever the group is that you might come from. These folks are using your hard-earned tax dollars to do these types of egregious things that are causing more hurt. Here's the other thing that hopefully we can get into, right? So we see these immediate impacts that happen inside of our communities, and here's where they continue to shoot themselves in the foot. It is because when you do these types of things to government workers and the contractors, those types of things, you're actually impacting the economy, an economy that is literally teetering at the moment, right? They try and put out this false message that we have this incredibly strong economy. Yeah, we had a strong economy 2 years ago, a year ago, but now because of the tariffs and because of a number of other things, there are some real challenges that are in that space. So when you take away, so every day when we have this government shutdown, we're talking about $500 million a day in lost wages, right? We're talking about 8 to 10 million jobs, along with the folks who are working there in the federal government, contractors, subcontractors, and others who are connected. So when you do these types of things, you're literally sending these significant ripples. I now say it's a tsunami through the economy on a global scale. Yep. You will also eventually impact the credit rating of the United States if you allow this to continue to go on. Because the folks who evaluate that will say, there's too much instability. Your government is not strong. Your government is not serious about helping your economy to move forward. So there's all these other dynamics that this administration needs to pay more attention to, because when you hurt black folks and when you hurt brown folks and when you hurt lower wealth white folks, you are also hurting this economy, and you are also putting us in very dire straits.
No, and I agree 200%. And not to go on to a different subject, but I think it is important to add to the conversation that what they did in Georgia is with the Hyundai plant, where you had that lady who's running for office and governor in Georgia, called to, hey, there's some undocumented workers at the Hyundai plant, and to find out these were South Koreans that was help in preparing the plant for American workers. And now the South Korean government said, you know what? We're gonna get our people out, and we're moving out. We're not coming back. And so now you have the governor of Georgia pleading to the Hyundai plant, say, please, that was a mess up on their part, but at this point, South Korea is like, you know what? America's not serious. We're thinking of just pulling the plug and say that we're done with it. But just go back to that conversation, like you were saying, that the rest of the world sees America are not serious, and so they're like, I don't think I want to deal. I don't want to financially deal with the United States, because if this is what they're doing with this, I can't imagine what else they can do.
I mean, once again, you hit it right on the head. It's about the erosion of trust, right? So we know in our own personal relationships, right? Well, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, friend, father, child. When you break that trust, you know how hard it is to rebuild, right? So when you see these types of actions, again, they're made out of hate, is what they are. And when you focus on hate, hate never has fixed one problem in this country. Maya Angelou talked about that one time, said it caused a whole lot of problems, but it never fixed one thing. And we see it continue to play out time and time and time again. So you continue to break people's trust, both locally and then internationally. Of course, they're like, you know what, we've got other choices. And that's what I don't think that folks get, right? We are living in the 21st century in 2025. People have choices, right? And there are others who want to see us make these types of mistakes, because they're like, you know what? It's like when Biggie said, as soon as you buy that wine, I just creep up from behind and ask you what your interests are, who you be with.
Yes.
So that's what these other countries are doing. They're watching America continue to make these really ridiculous moves. And then they're like, you know what? You come over here, you come down to Brazil, we treat you right. Yeah. Or you can come to China, we're going to treat you right. Or there's a laundry list of these folks who are just like, when America slips, when America makes these types of intentional mistakes, then they're like, you know what? I'll love you. He don't love you, I'll love you. And they just start to, they slide up in there. So again, there are all these things that connect to these actions that these folks are doing that continue to weaken us as a country, and definitely continue to weaken the folks who are most vulnerable in this country.
Yeah, definitely. If you go to the farmers, and a lot of the farmers who produce soybeans, with these tariffs, that screwed the farmers. In China, who were the top buyer of soybeans here, China's like, you know what? F that. I'm like, all right, if this is what you're going to do, we're going to go somewhere else. And that's where they're going. And so you have all these farmers stuck with these soybeans, and they're like, can we get a bailout in this current administration? It's like, that's not my problem.
Right.
But go ahead, add to it. But again, this kind of goes with what we're talking about.
Yeah, and there are lessons. If you go back and look at the cotton industry, of course, we all know how that played out for us. But the cotton industry itself failed. One of the reasons that it failed is because you had a set of tariffs that were going on, and people said, you know what, we can get our cotton someplace else. So the soybean example you gave is just another continuation of that. This is just, again, and you and I have talked about voting and the civic process, and we've got some friends who voted and some who didn't, who said they were going to sit on the couch, and some who made every other reason. And all of it, there are consequences, and this is a part of the consequences. But that doesn't mean that we stay in this moment, with our voices not being heard, and us not getting engaged in whatever form or fashion, works for folks. But that's why, again, I want people to just pay attention. I want you to watch your pocketbook. I want you to watch your savings account. I want you to watch when you go into the grocery store, and where you used to go in and get 4 or 5 bags, now you can only get 2 bags for $100, even if you shop at Kroger's. So we've got all these different dynamics that are going on that we need to deal with in this moment, but also think critically about how we want to show up in the future.
Right, and also I think one of the big things we don't talk about when we have this conversation is, like, you see the taking away of the power of Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. And the more you see this current administration, is you see the irrelevance of Congress when it comes to basically like when you talk about when it comes to the purse, the financial aspect of it.
Yeah. Well, we got the 3 branches of government, right? All of us when we was little kids, used to watch a Saturday morning cartoon when, talking about I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And just walking us through the whole thing, we learn different ways. So so right now, Republicans have the presidency. They have both the House and the Senate. And let's be honest, they have the Supreme Court, right? Which is supposed to be nonpartisan, but we all understand really what was really real going on there. Now, why is this government shutdown going on? Well, Democrats, this was one of the leverage points where they said, you know what? We're trying to make sure that your health care is going to be intact. We understand that some things might expire, and this is an opportunity for us to try and negotiate and make sure that people are protected so that, a few million people won't go without health care coverage. So if Congress was doing the right thing and actually had a spine, they would actually be having conversations with each other in a bipartisan way and coming up with, how to keep the government funded and also making sure that everybody's protected. But because, that's not what's going on and people are just taking their direction from the White House, then you see this dynamic where there's no real governance that is going on. People are bending the knee and they're just allowing the president to be able to say and do whatever he wants, whether it is legal or not, and also whether it is overreaching. You remember how folks used to always talk about government overreach. And now we see it in every aspect of people's lives. And, that is a part of an authoritarian regime where they want you to be scared. They are the ones that make all the decisions. They decide who gets the resources and who don't. And of course, we know how that plays out. It is the wealthy continuing not to just get wealthy, but to get uber wealthy. And everyday people who are out there grinding continue to get less and less.
No. And definitely, I'm on that part. But one thing with the Democrats, I think, is that, the healthcare issue is important, but I would add more elements to it. If I was there, I would say, hey, there shouldn't be National Guards in DC. There shouldn't be National Guard in Portland. Don't weaponize the military in urban cities.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think I can't speak for them. I don't ever tell anybody who to vote for, Democrat, Republican, Independent. The only thing I say is vote for somebody who cares about your community. You know how I get down.
Yeah, no doubt.
But we also got to understand how Capitol Hill works. I worked up there for a couple of years. I worked for John Conyers when he was chairman of the Judiciary Committee. So, the individuals, the people who win, the votes and who have the more numbers, whether on the Senate or the House side, they're the ones who then run the committees. They're the ones who have the Speaker of the House. If we're talking about the House side of the equation, they set the agenda. So when we see this dynamic that's going on with the National Guard, there's not a lot that Democrats can actually do about it. They can raise it and talk about how it is an injustice and how you also, we have laws on the books that you're not supposed to weaponize, whether it is the military, the National Guard. There's a couple of ways that usually the National Guard gets pulled into a situation if there's a huge level of chaos that's going on. And that's why they lied and had all this misinformation saying there was all this crime and death and murder and despair going on. And we all know that that's not true. Yes, there are pockets of stuff that need to be addressed. The other dynamic is when there's a natural disaster. So those are the two times usually when you would see the National Guard in. And there are actually, words that are written down in law and statute that speak to when you are not allowed to do that. But going back to your initial point, when you have folks on Capitol Hill who are not willing to stand up for democracy, for law, for justice, then you have an administration that says, you know what, I'm just going to see how much I can get away with until somebody pushes back. And then when you don't have courts, because we've had district courts and others who have said, you can't do this. And then it'll make its way up to the highest level. And then they create this space saying, well, you know what, we need to continue to evaluate this, and then we'll get back to you in 6 months or whatever it might be. That gives him the ability to be able to move around the edges and to do some things that no other president, whether it would be a Democrat or a Republican would even try. That's why we find ourselves in the moment that we do.
And it's kind of interesting too, because the last time we had this situation was this current president. You know, the shutdown was 45 days. But if I remember, back in what 2011, he basically said in an interview that anytime we have a government shutdown, it is the blame of the current president.
Yep.
And now, if you look at it, he's weaponizing the presidency, blaming the other side. Like if you go to different websites of the government, he's blaming the other side for the shutdown.
Mm-hmm. Well, you and I are both poets, right? And you remember when Baldwin said, "I can't believe what you say because I see what you do."
Yes.
So even though he may have said that stuff, back in 2011, we see how he actually gets down, and that's the dynamic that we currently that's going on, because nobody pushes back, or very few people push back. And let me just call it out so folks understand what I'm saying when I mean that. So you've got not only the court system that continues to give passes, right? You have these corporations that continue to bow, right? That have huge amounts of power. For anybody who's ever spent any time in Washington, D.C., corporations, when they go up to Capitol Hill, people listen. They get invited to discussions at the White House. So they have a huge amount of influence. When you look at a number of these other organizations that are out there, these big national organizations that are also being squeezed right now and are also being silent. So it is each and every one of us who are everyday folks. So of course we need to raise our voices and get engaged how we see fit. But I don't want us to have to carry all the weight ourselves, because that is unfair. You have powerful entities who are also either being silent or who are signing off on a lot of this foolishness. So there's responsibility to go around. So when he made that statement before, he knew, inside of his heart and his value system, about how he would actually get down if he had the opportunity. And now we see it playing out before our eyes, when our dear sister said, what was it that Maya Angelou had shared? I can't, oh my goodness, I'm forgetting exactly what that quote is, but it'll pop back in my head in a second.
No. Definitely. And it's just crazy. Like, I think one of the most dangerous thing is people that's complicit, is that they don't see nothing, they just go with it. And I think that's one of the things that I worry about in this current time, is they go with the current situation. Like they're like, oh, if it doesn't affect me, then I'm fine with it. But back to your article, like you talk about courage, right? So what does courage look like to you in this current environment that we're in right now?
Wow, what does courage look like? It looks like Ida B. Wells, right? When lynchings were going on, but she was still willing to bring it forward and put a spotlight on it, even though they said, you might be next. So you've got that dynamic that's going on. Courage looks like when you are pushed and you still show up. And I understand everybody has to make the evaluation, because you got all kinds of other things that are going on, but they count on folks being so tired and so beat down that they just give up, and they're just like, you know what? As you just said, as long as it ain't me, as long as they're not in my community, as long as I still can do X, Y, and Z. But eventually everything swings around. So we might think that we're safe right now, but once they get done with whoever they're focusing on, they're gonna move on to the next set. And if you read any of the stuff and many of the reports that they put out there, and how they show up each and every day on TV, that they're like, yo, we just gonna flex on you, because what you gonna do? And it's interesting, because if we was in the street and somebody rolled up on you and did some of these things, you would be like, yeah, okay, check. I got something for you right here.
Right.
But again, I understand that people have all kinds of things that they have to consider about how they want to show up. But the most important thing, courage, is about showing up, and then showing up in the form or fashion that works best for you and your family.
No, facts on that. I want to end it with that. But before we end this, amazing conversation because again, people need to know how, this shutdown is going to impact them. I think we did that in different layers. The most important thing is just do your research.
Mhm.
Don't get your information from one place. But if you do get it from one place, get it from Word and Black because they do a phenomenal job of breaking down what impact us as Black people.
Mhm.
So, Uncle, what I want to do, because you're a phenomenal poet,
Mhm.
do you want to, before we end it out, do you want to recite a piece? Do you have a piece you want to share with the people? Because I know you go on different shows and they don't bring that up. And I would do a disservice if I don't bring up your talent when it comes to poetry.
Uh, yeah. Give me 1 second, man.
Take take your time. Take your time. Whatever you want to do. I know I put you on the spot, but at the same time, we share poetry, text wise, and so
Yes.
people who's watching this podcast, I want people to listen to your skills because you got phenomenal skills. You've been on a Facebook Live with Abiel doing from the Last Poets. You recited a piece, and he said that was fire. So I'm not trying to name drop or anything like that, but I want to let people know that you're a phenomenal poet.
Yeah. This is a love letter to the community, right? To all those amazing folks who do the work, but nobody pays attention.
Mm,
And I called it I Love You Still.
mm,
I don't do light love. Don't do the easy goodbye or the slip through crack sigh. I love like old folks remember war, etched deep, still limping, but refusing to forget. I love you with a hunger that don't close shop at dusk, that don't take Sundays off. My chest still carries your laughter like gospel, still cooks your name in my mouth like it's supper. You think love got an expiration date? Nah, beloved. Mine keeps breathing, even in your silence. It ain't gone, it just waits, folded like prayers in the seams of my becoming. I love you.
I love that, and that goes for our people who kind of, I want to say, on the wrong side of history. I'm going to say the wrong side of history, but to let them know we still love you, even though we disagree where you're at right now. Hopefully, you have that in the moment. I'm going to say
All right.
that in the moment, and realize that what you were thinking all the time when you were talking about being assimilated, and at the end of the day, they didn't want nothing to do with you.
Mm.
So hopefully, I'm not praying for it, but I'm just saying if it happens, if you do have that in moment and you want to come back, you always have a home. So
Yes, there it is. There it is. Yeah, because black folks, we gotta love black folks as long as black folks want to be authentic about what the needs that exist inside of our community are. So you can come home if you're ready to, be black again.
that's right. And you got a home cooked meal too. So I'm
Right.
gonna leave it like that. How can people find you?
Yeah, we'll leave it where it is.
Yes.
Yes, yes. Well,
But
blessings,
how
blessings,
can,
blessings.
yes, how can people find you?
Yo, go to Word in Black, right? So not only do you find me there, but you find all these amazing, amazing Black writers who are speaking truth about all the dynamics that are going on inside of our community. And then, of course, you can always find me, on all the other social media platforms under Mustafa Santiago Ali.
Facts. All the links will be in the description below. Again, this has been an amazing conversation. Like, subscribe, and also, it was another thing too. You have right. You have the It's not a Patreon. What's the thing that people can follow you on? What is the
I
what's
mean, there's all kinds of them. There's Blue Sky and all these other folks that are out there. So everything I do because I love my community and I love the possibilities of the future. So I don't do any of the things to make money. I just share.
No, an important thing is just to follow what you're doing too, because again,
Yeah.
you speak truth to power, and the people, if you want that information, this is the source where you can get that information from, because he holds no punches. He tells it how it is. And if you want that and you care about the environment that we live in, you definitely got to follow what he's doing. So, like I said, the links will be in the description below. And when is the? We'll talk behind the scene about the poetry book, but yeah, we need that, or audio book, or you going on a 10-day tour to different facilities to do spoken word. That has to happen. So we'll talk about that later down the road. Hopefully that happens, but we'll talk behind the scenes. But again, this has been another amazing conversation here on the podcast. Like, subscribe, and we're out. Peace. All right. Stay on.